On a quiet evening in a suburban neighborhood, the soft glow of smartphone screens illuminated the living room where Emily Hart had set up her phone for an Instagram live session, unaware that this decision would soon become the scene of a horrifying tragedy. She adjusted the camera, her hands slightly trembling, not from fear of the audience, but from the weight of the truth. She had resolved two revealed tales about her husband, Thomas Hart, a man whose charm masked secrets, manipulation, and possibly dangerous intentions. A duality that Emily had navigated for years in silence. But tonight, fueled by a mixture of courage and desperation, she had decided to speak openly, to expose the facade for all to witness, and to reclaim her voice before it was too late. As viewers began to join, the comments section filling with casual greetings, emojis, and the usual online chatter, Emily inhaled deeply, her eyes scanning the camera frame as if it were a mirror reflecting the gravity of the moment. She started narrating her story, her voice steady but charged with emotion, recounting subtle patterns of control, coercion, and deception she had endured, the small but deliberate ways her husband had isolated her, and the incidents she had once doubted herself about, but now recognized as manipulative and dangerous. Midway through her disclosure, the atmosphere in the room shifted a faint click, almost imperceptible, followed by a sudden sense of suffocation as Emily clutched at her chest, her words breaking into gasps, the phone capturing the raw, terrified expression that she could no longer mask, while her audience on Instagram reacted with confusion, disbelief, and mounting alarm, pleading in the comments section, some believing it to be a prank, others begging her to stop and seek help, but none prepared for what was about to happen. Within moments, Emily collapsed, her body falling to the floor with a sickening finality. The live feed continuing to broadcast the scene as frantic viewers realized the severity, calling for emergency services, capturing evidence that would later become crucial for law enforcement. The room that had once felt private and safe now seemed menacing, filled with echoes of her last words, her bravery immortalized on social media as viewers watched helplessly while the clock ticked toward tragedy. Neighbors soon arrived, alerted by the rising cries and shouts from online followers who had called local authorities, finding paramedics racing against time. But despite their efforts, Emily was pronounced dead at the scene, her courage having cost her life in an instant, leaving behind a cascade of questions about motive, timing, and responsibility. Investigators combed through the digital and physical evidence, the phone, the live video, text messages, and emails, all pointing toward a complex interplay of deceit, hidden aggression, and possibly premeditated intent. As they tried to reconstruct the final moments of her life and determine whether the act had been spontaneous, triggered by unknown health conditions, or deliberately induced by someone who had felt threatened by her revelation, social media erupted with reactions. Friends and strangers alike sharing clips, screenshots, and theories, while journalists descended upon the quiet neighborhood, seeking details that could explain how a personal confession had turned into a public tragedy, exposing both the dangers of unchecked power in intimate relationships and the vulnerabilities inherent in sharing personal truth on a global platform. The police, meanwhile, remained methodical, focusing on timing, digital footprints, and potential suspects. recognizing that in an age of instant broadcast and social media exposure, the line between virtual courage and real-world peril could be perilously thin. By the end of the night, the community was left reeling, the house silent, the phone still recording, the world outside unaware of the complexity and danger hidden behind suburban facades. While detectives began the painstaking process of piecing together Emily Hart's final act of bravery, a tragic moment that highlighted the intersection of personal courage, intimate secrets, and the deadly consequences that sometimes accompany revealing the truth. Detective Sarah Lawson arrived at the Hart residence in the early hours of the morning. The quiet suburban street bathed in the cold glow of police lights, a stark contrast to the warmth and normalcy it usually conveyed. Her mind racing as she prepared to confront a scene that was part digital evidence, part devastating reality, and entirely complex. The living room where Emily Hart had collapsed still bore the traces of her final moments, the tipped-over chair, the phone on the tripod still recording, and the faint scent of perfume mingled with antiseptic from the paramedics. Rushed attempts to save her life while neighbors and witnesses hovered nearby, their faces etched with shock, confusion, and curiosity, all struggling to reconcile the sudden violence with the peaceful suburban surroundings. As Lawson stepped inside, her eyes immediately scanned the environment for clues, the positioning of the furniture, the phone angle that had captured Emily's words and her final expressions, and subtle indications that the act may have been hastened or facilitated, whether intentionally or inadvertently, by the presence of another person, someone who might have been monitoring the live stream or manipulating events from nearby. The detective understood that the intersection of social media and real-world action complicated the investigation, transforming ordinary domestic spaces into arenas of high-stakes scrutiny. The team immediately began collecting evidence, the phone, with every second of Emily's live confession, text messages leading up to the broadcast, emails, and security camera footage from the neighborhood, all of which needed to be cross-referenced to construct a precise timeline of events, determine potential suspects, and assess whether the death had been natural, accidental, or induced by foul play. Digital forensics specialists worked tirelessly, examining metadata, IP addresses, and background sounds captured on the live stream, noting any anomalies that could point to intrusion or manipulation. Meanwhile, Detective Lawson interviewed neighbors and friends who had interacted with Emily in the days preceding the live broadcast, uncovering subtle but telling signs of anxiety, fear, and tension in her behavior, including messages expressing concern about her husband's reactions, and moments of hesitation that suggested she had been weighing the risks of disclosure. The detective noted that these small behavioral cues, combined with the content of the live confession, painted a picture of a woman caught between bravery and vulnerability, seeking justice or truth while navigating the dangerous realities of an intimate relationship shadowed by control and secrecy. As the investigation progressed, a profile of Thomas Hart began to emerge, a man outwardly charming and seemingly devoted, yet increasingly controlling and manipulative behind closed doors, whose interactions with Emily suggested a deep need to dominate and silence, making him a prime subject for further scrutiny, both in terms of motive and opportunity. Financial records, phone logs, and digital footprints were traced meticulously, revealing patterns that suggested surveillance, coercion, or prior attempts to monitor Emily's activities, raising the chilling possibility that her final broadcast had been anticipated and perhaps influenced by someone intimately aware of her routines and fears. Outside, social media continued to explode with reactions. Clips of the live broadcast circulated. Discussions on forums and news outlets analyzed every word, expression, and detail, while armchair detectives speculated on motive and opportunity, their theories ranging from accidental collapse to sinister orchestration, reflecting the modern reality in which personal tragedy becomes public spectacle, complicating both the investigation and the lives of those involved. Detective Lawson, however, focused only on the facts, corroborating witness statements, analyzing digital evidence, and methodically piecing together a timeline that could provide clarity amid chaos. By the end of the day, the precinct had amassed a wealth of data, yet the case remained both emotionally and technically challenging. Emily's courageous act of revealing the truth had left her dead, and the detectives were tasked with untangling the intersection of social media exposure, intimate relationships, and potential criminal intent, preparing to follow every lead, question every anomaly, and confront the unsettling reality that the truth, though spoken openly, could provoke consequences far beyond what anyone anticipated. As Detective Sarah Lawson delved deeper into Emily Hart's digital footprint, the intricate web of her life interactions, and the subtle tensions within her marriage began to emerge, revealing not only her courage, but also the hidden pressures she had faced. Pressures that now seemed inseparably linked to her untimely death. Analyzing Emily's Instagram history, private messages, and interactions with friends, the detective noticed repeated patterns of hesitation, cryptic warnings, and veiled threats that suggested Thomas Hart's increasing control and scrutiny over her communications, a behavior that escalated in the days leading up to the fateful live session, hinting at a psychological tension that may have contributed to both her decision to speak publicly and the tragic outcome. Every time-stamp comment and reaction provided clues, moments when Emily paused mid-sentence, glances toward certain areas of the room, and her subtle body language during the live stream all indicated acute awareness of surveillance, whether perceived or real, as if she sensed an unseen presence monitoring her courage. Forensic experts confirmed ambient sounds in the video that suggested movement outside the camera's view, slight echoes that could indicate another person's presence, and metadata anomalies hinting that the live feed may have been compromised, reinforcing the possibility that her death was not merely spontaneous, but potentially influenced by deliberate interference. Simultaneously, Lawson examined the psychological profile of Thomas Hart, piecing together information from neighbors, colleagues, and digital traces, revealing a man skilled at maintaining outward charm while cultivating control through manipulation, intimidation, and coercion, someone who may have felt threatened by the exposure of his private actions and behavior, and who had access to the environment, timing, and technological tools necessary to influence the fatal events of Emily's broadcast. Each revelation layered complexity onto the investigation, requiring careful correlation of motive, opportunity, and means. Throughout the day, interviews with friends and family uncovered subtle discrepancies in Thomas's account of the evening, alongside evidence of monitoring Emily's communications, including deleted messages, tracked locations, and suspicious logins on her devices, indicating a pattern of premeditation or at least knowledge that her disclosure could occur and potentially endanger her. Every detail raised questions about intent, legal culpability, and the extent to which domestic surveillance and control may have facilitated a lethal outcome. In parallel, the detective traced Emily's broader social network, discovering individuals who had been contacted for advice, support, or corroboration, whose statements painted a portrait of a woman determined to confront hidden truths despite growing fear, highlighting the juxtaposition between her public bravery and private vulnerability, the emotional strain that accompanied transparency, and the dangerous intersection of digital exposure and intimate relationships marked by secrecy and power imbalance. As night fell over the quiet suburb, the investigation shifted to a meticulous reconstruction of the live feed, frame by frame, second by second, each movement analyzed for anomalies, each sound scrutinized for evidence, and every comment in the chat window reviewed for timing and reaction patterns, offering insights into how quickly the situation escalated, how observers' responses may have influenced the unfolding, and how technological mediation transformed a private confession into a public tragedy. By the end of the analysis, Detective Lawson realized that Emily's death could not be considered a singular event. It was the culmination of psychological pressure, potential external interference, and real-time exposure amplified by social media, a lethal convergence that underscored the perilous consequences of revealing intimate truths in a world connected digitally, yet fraught with human malice, secrecy, and control, setting the stage for a confrontation with both motive and accountability, and a deeper exploration into the heart of domestic manipulation and potential premeditated harm. The investigation into Emily Hart's death quickly expanded beyond the confines of her home and digital devices as Detective Sarah Lawson pursued the web of financial records, communication patterns, and personal connections that revealed the broader context of her life and her marriage, uncovering a series of transactions, unusual bank withdrawals, and purchases made in secrecy, all of which suggested an environment where control, monitoring, and the exertion of influence were constant. Interviews with coworkers and friends painted a picture of a woman increasingly isolated, whose attempts to confide in trusted individuals were often met with subtle intimidation or interference, hinting at a sustained pattern of coercion that may have contributed to her tragic decision to speak publicly, while simultaneously exposing vulnerabilities that could have been exploited by someone with both motive and opportunity. Detective Lawson meticulously examined the timeline leading up to the Instagram Live broadcast, identifying moments where Emily had been unusually cautious, checking her phone, glancing toward doors, and pausing mid-action as if sensing an unseen presence. The forensic team noting anomalies in ambient sound that suggested movement just outside the camera's field of view, faint creaks and soft thuds that could be interpreted as a human presence or mechanical interference, combined with metadata analysis revealing potential prior access to the feed or her device. These findings raised the chilling possibility that her death had been anticipated or even orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of her habits and vulnerabilities. Concurrently, the detective compiled a psychological and behavioral profile of Thomas Hart, exploring his past relationships, online activity, and behavioral patterns, identifying traits consistent with manipulation, control, and an intolerance for exposure of private misconduct. While analyzing his interactions in the days prior to Emily's live broadcast revealed a series of subtle pressures, conversations laced with suggestion, and digital traces indicating monitoring of her online behavior. Each piece of evidence suggested not only motive but opportunity, reinforcing suspicions that the fatal outcome was linked to a deliberate orchestration rather than mere accident. As Lawson delved into Emily's social network, she uncovered friends and acquaintances who had noticed changes in her demeanor, messages expressing unease, and fleeting remarks about fear of consequences if certain truths were revealed, all of which indicated an increasing psychological burden. A tension that escalated until the fateful moment captured Liv for the world to witness, highlighting the dangerous intersection of intimate relationships, digital exposure, and the fatal consequences of confronting long-concealed truths. The detectives' team also scrutinized Thomas Hart's movements, phone logs, and potential accomplices, noting inconsistencies and opportunities for access to Emily's environment in the critical hours preceding her death. Combined with the forensic reconstruction of her collapsed timing, body positioning, and environmental factors, the evidence painted a complex picture of interaction between human psychology, opportunity, and real-world risk, suggesting that even minor manipulations or pressures could have contributed to a lethal outcome. Meanwhile, the social media response added a new layer of complexity. Viral dissemination of the live footage, commentary, and speculative narratives created both challenges and insights for law enforcement, providing clues while also complicating witness recollections and public perception, demonstrating the power of digital platforms to amplify tragedy and document events in ways that traditional investigation rarely afforded. By late evening, Detective Lawson synthesized the accumulating evidence into a coherent theory. Emily's death, though sudden, was the culmination of sustained psychological pressure, real-time exposure, and the manipulative influence of someone intimately connected to her life, a dangerous convergence of control, secrecy, and public revelation, underscoring the lethal consequences of intimate power dynamics in the digital age, and setting the stage for confronting the full scope of accountability, both personal and potentially criminal, for the tragic events that had unfolded so publicly and irrevocably. As Detective Sarah Lawson continued to untangle the events surrounding Emily Hart's death, she focused on reconstructing the moments leading up to the Instagram Live broadcast, seeking to identify subtle triggers, environmental cues, and behavioral patterns that might explain the sudden collapse, while simultaneously exploring the possibility of external influence or foul play. Meticulous examination of the footage revealed small but significant details the way Emily's eyes flickered toward the doorway, the slight hesitation in her movements, and the almost imperceptible shift in her posture during certain statements which, when cross-referenced with metadata, suggested a level of awareness and anticipation, as though she sensed a looming presence or interference. The detectives team expanded their investigation into Thomas Hart's digital footprint, uncovering encrypted communications, deleted messages, and financial transactions indicating both surveillance and control, raising the troubling question of whether Emily's husband had orchestrated circumstances that directly or indirectly contributed to her sudden death. Each discovery pointed to a pattern of manipulation, monitoring, and potential premeditation, intensifying scrutiny of his movements, behavior, and interactions in the hours leading up to the live broadcast. Interviews with friends, colleagues, and neighbors revealed nuanced insights into Emily's state-of-mind, expressions of fear, avoidance, and anxiety interwoven with courage and resolve as she had prepared to reveal long-held truths, demonstrating a profound internal struggle between exposing hidden realities and the very real danger of doing so. These insights reinforced the notion that her death, while instantaneous, was situated within a broader context of coercion, psychological pressure, and potentially lethal control. Forensic analysis corroborated these concerns. Ambient noises captured on the live feed, subtle inconsistencies in lighting and shadows, and the precise timing of Emily's collapse suggested that an external factor, human or environmental, may have accelerated the fatal event, challenging initial assumptions of natural causes and emphasizing the importance of integrating digital evidence, behavioral analysis, and environmental reconstruction to form a complete understanding of the incident. Detective Lawson also explored the psychological profile of individuals capable of exerting such control and influence within a domestic setting, identifying traits of manipulation, dominance, and strategic preemption, characteristics that aligned with Thomas Hart's documented behaviors, communications, and prior interactions with Emily. Combining this profile with the digital and forensic evidence allowed the team to construct a detailed timeline, highlighting moments of interaction, potential interference, and points where the situation could have escalated fatally. Meanwhile, social media provided a dual-edged perspective. While the viral spread of Emily's last moments offered real-time documentation and potential clues, it also introduced misinformation, speculation, and public pressure, requiring careful navigation by law enforcement to extract factual content from commentary, reactions, and emotionally charged posts. These dynamics underscored the complexity of investigating a true crime in an era where private tragedy becomes instantaneously public, and where the intersection of digital documentation and human behavior creates both opportunities and challenges for uncovering truth. By late evening, Detective Lawson had mapped out a comprehensive reconstruction. Emily's courage to speak the truth, the psychological pressures she faced, the subtle but influential actions of her husband, and the technological footprint left by her live broadcast all converged to illuminate a scenario where truth, fear, and control collided, resulting in a sudden, fatal outcome. Each piece of evidence highlighted the delicate interplay between personal agency, external influence, and the unpredictable consequences of revealing secrets in a world where every action is potentially observed, recorded, and amplified. The chapter concluded with the understanding that pursuing justice for Emily Hart required not only technical investigation and forensic analysis, but also an empathetic reconstruction of her lived experience, an acknowledgement of the psychological and relational forces at play, and the determination to confront those responsible, ensuring that the tragic revelation captured on Instagram Live would not be the final word in a story of courage. manipulation, and loss. Asterisk. Detective Sarah Lawson's investigation into Emily Hart's sudden death intensified as she focused on linking the digital, behavioral, and environmental evidence into a coherent narrative, understanding that the lethal outcome was likely the result of multiple converging factors rather than a single cause. Analyzing the Instagram live footage frame by frame, she noted subtle cues in Emily's expressions, pauses, and shifts in breathing that suggested a combination of psychological stress and possible external influence. While metadata and forensic analysis indicated minor anomalies in network access and device activity, raising the possibility that someone with technical knowledge could have monitored or even interfered with the broadcast, amplifying the risk and hastening the fatal event. Concurrently, the detective scrutinized Thomas Hart's movements, communication patterns, and financial activity in the days preceding Emily's live session, uncovering evidence of surveillance, controlled interactions, and possible attempts to influence her decisions through subtle threats or coercion, painting a portrait of a person both capable of orchestrating control and potentially facilitating circumstances that contributed to her sudden collapse. Each discovery emphasized the intricate relationship between intimate power dynamics and the real-world consequences of exposure. Interviews with friends, family, and neighbors added depth to the investigation, revealing Emily's growing apprehension, moments of hesitation, and carefully concealed fears that reflected her awareness of a potentially dangerous domestic environment. While digital evidence confirmed that she had sought advice, documented suspicions, and expressed concern over consequences if the truth became public, reinforcing the notion that her fatal act of courage had been undertaken under immense psychological pressure. With awareness of possible retaliation, the forensic team's reconstruction of the living room environment highlighted additional contributing factors. Subtle changes in lighting, ambient noise, and spatial arrangement of furniture that could have influenced her physical state, combined with stress-induced physiological responses, suggesting that even minor manipulations or the presence of another individual could have accelerated the collapse, blurring the line between natural and externally induced outcomes. These findings required Lawson to integrate expertise in behavioral analysis, environmental science, and digital forensics to develop a comprehensive understanding of the event. In parallel, social media activity surrounding the live broadcast offered both insight and complication. Timestamps of viewer reactions, comments, and notifications provided a real-time record of responses that could indicate timing, awareness, and potential external interactions, while also creating a chaotic mix of speculation and misinformation, necessitating careful filtering to extract actionable intelligence for the investigation. By late night, Lawson had synthesized the patterns into a working theory. Emily Hart's death was the tragic intersection of her courageous decision to reveal hidden truths, the psychological and relational pressures imposed by her husband, potential technological interference, and environmental factors within her home. Each element alone may not have been lethal, but together they created a situation where exposure, fear, and control culminated in an instant fatality, underscoring the deadly consequences of domestic manipulation in the digital age. The detective's meticulous analysis also revealed the broader implications of the case. The vulnerability of individuals who attempt to expose hidden truths online. The ease with which intimate relationships can become venues of control and danger, and the necessity for law enforcement to adapt. Investigative techniques to address crimes occurring at the intersection of human psychology, technology, and social media, ensuring that justice is achievable even when the tragedy is broadcast for the world to see. As the chapter concluded, Detective Lawson prepared to confront both the digital and human elements that had converged in Emily's death, understanding that the path to accountability required confronting manipulation, control, and potential criminal intent, while honoring the courage of a woman who had dared to speak the truth in the face of unimaginable risk. Detective Sarah Lawson's investigation reached a critical stage as she began piecing together the final hours of Emily Hart's life. Synthesizing digital footprints, witness statements, forensic evidence, and behavioral analysis into a comprehensive narrative, seeking to understand not only what had happened, but why it had happened with such devastating suddenness. Every piece of the puzzle timestamps, from the Instagram Live, anomalies in device activity, subtle creaks and sounds in the room, Emily's gestures and breathing patterns, and Thomas Hart's communications and movements was meticulously analyzed to determine the sequence of events and potential influences, with the detective focusing on whether the fatal outcome had been a result of natural stress, psychological pressure, or deliberate manipulation by someone with access and intent. Interviews with friends, colleagues, and neighbors provided additional context, revealing Emily's growing awareness of potential threats, her increasing caution in personal and digital communications, and her ultimate decision to speak publicly despite the danger, emphasizing both her bravery and vulnerability. These human factors were critical in understanding the interplay between psychological stress and situational dynamics, illustrating how intimate relationships, control, and fear can converge into life-threatening circumstances when combined with technological exposure. Digital forensics continue to reveal compelling evidence, network logs showing unusual access points, metadata indicating potential prior monitoring, and deleted or altered communications suggested a deliberate attempt to observe or influence Emily's final broadcast, while behavioral analysis of Thomas Hart highlighted patterns consistent with manipulation, coercion, and exertion of control over personal environments, supporting the hypothesis that his influence may have indirectly or directly contributed to the fatal outcome. The convergence of psychological profiling, technical expertise, and environmental reconstruction allowed the detective to build a multi-layered understanding of the case. As Lawson reconstructed the living room scene, she noted how subtle environmental factors, the placement of the tripod, the orientation of furniture, the lighting, and ambient sounds could have exacerbated stress and physiological responses, potentially accelerating the collapse, and how an external presence or interference might have influenced timing and awareness. Each detail was documented and cross-referenced, forming a coherent map of human and environmental interaction that led to Emily's death. Meanwhile, public and social media reaction created both challenges and resources for the investigation. Viral distribution of the live footage, commentary, speculation, and emotional responses provided corroboration for timelines and behavior, but also required careful filtering to extract factual information from misinformation. underscoring the complexities of modern true crime investigations in a world where private tragedy becomes public spectacle. By late evening, Detective Lawson had developed a detailed reconstruction of Emily Hart's final moments, her courageous decision to speak the truth, the psychological pressure exerted by her intimate partner, environmental and digital variables influencing her actions, and the convergence of these factors into an instantaneous, fatal event. The evidence suggested a combination of human, psychological, and technological influences, highlighting the lethal potential of control and secrecy within domestic relationships, amplified by the immediacy of social media exposure. With a clear understanding of the sequence and contributing factors, Lawson prepared for the next phase, confronting potential perpetrators, integrating behavioral, forensic, and digital evidence into actionable leads, and ensuring that accountability would extend beyond conjecture to factual resolution, honoring Emily's bravery while navigating the unprecedented challenges of a death broadcast live to the world. The culmination of Detective Sarah Lawson's investigation into Emily Hart's sudden death brought her face to face with the complex interplay of digital evidence, behavioral patterns, and the intimate dynamics of a marriage marked by control, secrecy, and manipulation. As she meticulously reconstructed the timeline, cross-referenced device activity, and analyzed environmental factors to determine how a courageous act of truth-telling on Instagram Live had resulted in instantaneous fatality. Every frame of the broadcast, every subtle movement of Emily, and every anomaly in the surrounding environment was scrutinized alongside Thomas Hart's communications, financial transactions, and prior behavioral patterns, revealing a disturbing consistency between control, opportunity, and possible indirect or direct contribution to the tragic outcome. By synthesizing witness statements, forensic reports, and digital forensic analysis, Lawson identified critical junctures where Emily's awareness, courage, and vulnerability intersected with environmental and technological variables, creating a scenario in which stress, interference, and potential manipulation converged to produce a lethal consequence. Subtle anomalies in the footage, background noises, reflections, and timing discrepancies suggested that the fatal collapse may have been influenced or exacerbated, pointing toward a deliberate orchestration or at least facilitation. In parallel, Lawson constructed a psychological profile of Thomas Hart, integrating insights from colleagues, neighbors, and digital communications, revealing traits of coercion, surveillance, and intolerance for exposure, which, when combined with the behavioral and digital evidence, suggested a pattern of indirect control that may have contributed to Emily's sudden death, underscoring the lethal potential of manipulation in domestic relationships, particularly when amplified by technological oversight and the permanence of social media exposure. The detective also considered broader contextual factors: Emily's escalating anxiety, prior messages expressing fear, and subtle indications of monitoring highlighted a dangerous trajectory leading up to the broadcast, while forensic reconstruction of the room and digital metadata revealed precise correlations between timing, movement, and environmental triggers that could exacerbate stress-induced physiological reactions, offering a comprehensive explanation of how courage, control, and situational pressures intersected tragically. Public and media engagement added another layer of complexity, as viral dissemination of the live footage and widespread commentary created both challenges and resources for law enforcement, providing real-time corroboration for timelines and behavioral analysis, while also complicating witness recollection, highlighting the double-edged nature of social media as both evidence and distraction. By nightfall, Detective Lawson had mapped out a coherent narrative: Emily Hart's decision to speak the truth, the psychological pressures imposed by her intimate partner, the subtle environmental and digital factors that may have contributed, and the broader societal context in which her actions were observed and amplified, all converged to explain the instantaneous and tragic outcome, allowing the detective to develop actionable leads for accountability, legal intervention, and closure for those affected. The final stage of the investigation focused on presenting the case with clarity, emphasizing how the lethal combination of domestic manipulation, technological monitoring, and psychological pressure can result in unforeseen tragedy, and ensuring that the complexity of Emily's experience, her bravery, and the contributing factors would be comprehensively documented. In closing, Lawson reflected on the lessons of the case, the inherent risks of digital transparency, the deadly consequences of relational control and secrecy, and the imperative for investigators to integrate behavioral, technological, and forensic insights in modern true crime cases, ensuring that the pursuit of truth honors the courage of those who speak out, confronts the mechanisms of control, and brings accountability to the forefront, transforming tragedy into both understanding and justice.